Don't be so hard on yourself. I think all of us tend to be our harshest critics. Um, but then again, I think that me being hard on myself is what really drove me to accomplish everything I've accomplished, right? And so I think with that, I'd say you're gonna be okay. Your life is gonna go on, and you're gonna actually survive many things you were told you wouldn't survive, and you're gonna impact other people's lives, and all the work you're doing right now is gonna pay off.
Welcome back to the TOWKA Talks podcast. Today I'm joined by Ronda Jarvis. She is a native of Santa Fe, New Mexico. Ronda attended the University of Illinois in Champaign-Urbana on an academic athletic scholarship for women with disabilities, one of the first programs of its kind in the nation from 1987 to 1992. While earning her master's degree in social work at the U of I, she also competed for the Fighting Illini, winning 5 consecutive national championships in wheelchair basketball. Jarvis went on to compete internationally, including in the World Championships in France, winning a gold medal in wheelchair basketball. She competed in the Paralympics in Barcelona in 1992, winning a silver medal, and the 1996 Paralympic Games in Atlanta, Georgia, winning a bronze medal in wheelchair basketball. After retiring from basketball, Ronda went on to compete in disabled water skiing, winning multiple medals. She was the first U.S. woman to run the outer course, equivalent to the able-bodied slalom course in water skiing. She hit a world record jump at the Disabled World Championships in Belgium, jumping an incredible height of 52 feet. She was named Athlete of the Year at the 2007 Disabled Water Ski World Championships held in Townsville, Australia. Rhonda, that is absolutely amazing as I'm saying it out loud. Thank you so much for joining me and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
So I just want to jump in right into your early life. Can you please give us a little bit about what life was like growing up in New Mexico?
Yeah, I was born and raised in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and it was just an awesome upbringing. I was very athletic, and just our entire family was very athletic and very involved in snow skiing and athletics in school, and it just was an awesome culture to be raised in. So I'm always very thankful to have been from a diverse place.
Did you down the road like start experiencing something health wise to where like oh you felt like something was wrong and you had to get checked out, or kind of walk us through what happened when you were 16 years old?
Yeah, so basically, I was very healthy as a child, and I was a risk taker. I was a little breaking arms and legs and all sorts of things. But essentially, I began to have back pain, and they were thinking it was attributed to like my gymnastics and all the athletics I played. But it took them about a year to diagnose me. I started having involvement in one of my legs, and they went in and did surgery and found a tumor on my spine that was pressing against it. And so then that led to a whole series of treatments and what ultimately put me in a wheelchair. So that was about 43 years ago.
Did that take a real emotional toll on you and your family? Because I can't imagine hearing that you have a tumor, especially at that age, is ever easy.
Yeah, it's interesting. When I think back at it, I never really thought about not being able to walk again. That really never entered my mind. What was most upsetting to me was not being able to play athletics. Like that's all I was focused on was like what my life was going to be like without being able to, play all the sports that I used to love.
Now, going kind of fast forwarding a little bit, going into college, did you want to play wheelchair basketball, or how did you get into doing that sport? Kind of walk us through a little bit of how what got you into doing that.
Yeah, so I started playing. So I actually started university at the University of New Mexico for a very brief period of time, and there was a men's basketball team there, and it was a wheelchair basketball team. And so I thought I'd go out, right? Like I wasn't shy, and I started playing with a group of men. And at that time, there was a national tournament going on, and my coach, Brad Hedrick at the University of Illinois, was there, and recruited me, and that's kind of what brought me to the University of Illinois. And it was a really phenomenal experience being able to compete collegiately. I always dreamed of doing that, and here I was having the opportunity to do that.
Was it a climate shock just because I'm sure it gets really cold up in Illinois compared to New Mexico?
It is very cold there. It was, but it was such a great experience. They have such a wonderful program for disabled athletes, and it was like a pioneering program. Now there's disabled sports programs all over the country, but back then it was the only one of its kind for women. And so it was just, I was young and I was able to tolerate the cold, but it was such a phenomenal opportunity to go to a top 10 university and then compete collegiately.
So competing internationally on the World Championship and Olympic teams, I'm assuming you had to try out. Like they didn't just tell like people like, "Hey, you want to be on the team." Was it kind of like a process to get onto those teams?
It was. I mean, it's just like anything. I think being part of the University of Illinois really helped me because we had such a regimented training, routine. I had been, because of having been on 5 consecutive national championships, we were one of the top women's teams in the country. And so it was pretty competitive, but it was, yeah, it was just, it was something I would have never even dreamed would have been possible to be able to compete at what would be really considered the Olympic level. The Paralympics are kind of equivalent.
Was that like a an uplifting time for you as far as like not only your physical state but also like mentally and emotionally just because here you are at the world stage, you're competing with the best of the best as far as disabled athletes, you're representing your country. Was that just something that really helped keep you like in a positive state of mind, even though, other it wasn't as big back then, I guess. I was born in 1992, so I was around it was around that time I was alive. I wasn't all
Yeah,
there,
you're
but
dating me now.
but did you feel like it definitely kept your spirit alive as far as other like young kids watching you and being inspired by what you were doing?
I think it was instrumental because when I first became disabled, I went through a period of depression. I didn't realize it at the time, but I really shut down. I happened to be watching the 1984 Olympic Games, and it was one of the first Paralympic kind of demonstration sports. Sharon Hedrick at the time, she was a women's wheelchair racer, competed. I saw her and I was like, I'm going to do that. Like I had hope, I had an aspiration of like, I'm going to do that one day. And she later became my teammate at the University of Illinois. And then to be able to play on that world stage, for me, it wasn't just playing on that world stage as it was getting there. It was the desire, the hard work, the all that went into the training, the having done everything in my power to be the best that I could be. It was that journey of getting better that just really transformed me mentally and physically.
Did you eventually want to get your master's degree at the University of Illinois? Was that like no question, like you wanted to stay and still compete and but also continue your education?
I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do, but I knew I wanted to keep playing sports. So, staying at the U of I, getting my master's degree made sense to be able, it's a wonderful school and it just allowed me to continue to stay engaged in athletics and get a great degree. And so it wasn't a tough decision.
So what got you into water skiing? Because I'm just curious. That's a pretty different sport than wheelchair basketball. So can you kind of walk us through the process of transitioning from wheelchair basketball to water skiing?
Yeah, so I did play wheelchair tennis for a little bit and I loved that, but I think growing up one of the things we did is were we went to the lake a lot and I skied growing up. It was just one of my passions and I loved the water and I had an opportunity to learn how to water ski. I was at a clinic and I fell in love and I think there's something incredible about being out of your wheelchair and having access to equipment that allows you to just compete like any other person would compete, able-bodied on the same type of modality. So in water skiing, there's slalom and then there's tricking and jumping. And it's like, it's kind of a level playing field. I'm just using an adapted ski to do it. So
Is that something that takes a lot of time and many, many practice runs as far as getting comfortable with the water going at a certain speed and then getting up to a certain height like you did eventually?
yes, it was. I'll be honest with you. When I went off my first jump, I was terrified. We literally use these suspension cages because you're jumping along. It's not only height, but it's like distance. So, like the landing, and I've seen many people crash. But like the adrenaline rush was like the best thing ever. And I just happened to excel at it. I don't know what it was about jumping that kind of appealed to me. So it was just a great way to challenge myself.
I think that's really interesting that what you said earlier about feeling free outside of your wheelchair. Is that something that you've noticed talking with other people who may also be not able to feel their legs or paralyzed that are able to do sports like that? Like it's just a common feeling that others will also feel if they do something outside of their comfort zone or outside of their wheelchair in this case.
Absolutely. And I think the other reason I was drawn to skiing is it works with people with various types of disabilities. So I was working, like there were people on the team who were blind, who there were other people on the ski team who had like amputation. So I think it also, when you're competing in the Paralympics, you're typically with the same type of spinal cord injury, kind of equivalent, where in skiing, it's more open, right? It's open to all disabilities. So to see people do these incredibly amazing things, and just the freedom of just not being bound to a chair per se. I don't really consider myself wheelchair bound, right? But it's just the freedom. It's like flying, right? It's like having access to water and speed. And, when you ski the intercourse, you ski at a very high speed and it's terrifying but it's great.
Is there a certain speed that you get to where like if you accidentally fall or mishandle yourself, that when you hit the water, it feels like you're hitting concrete?
Yes. In fact, when I was skiing what they call the inner course, it's skiing very fast. It's like 34 miles an hour. And then the length of the line shortens. And when I was at a national competition, I was going into a buoy and I fell and I tumbled so many times. And the ski literally, you can kind of see it slice through my lip and I'm bleeding. And of course, I had to go to the ER and get stitches. So that's like my little scar from skiing. So it's kind of dangerous.
I would definitely say so. I don't know if I would have the confidence and the courage to do that, but the fact that you, especially getting up over 50 feet in the air, that just sounds terrifying to me.
It's pretty adrenaline. It's an adrenaline rush, but it's also very I think it brought me back to feeling alive like I was prior to getting injured. I mean, I was always a daredevil, and so it just tapped into the parts of me that I really love about it, being adventuresome and putting myself out there. So,
We had a little bit of a conversation before we went live about your sister because Brenda Kay and I work together and we talk quite a bit about each other's families and
yeah.
basically try to help each other in the work environment. She was telling me a little bit recently that she was always inspired by you with your willingness and courage and the fact that you had been through so much at such a young age. Did it help you at all to like look up to your sister? Because obviously Brenda had an incredible career at Adams State and hurdling and what she was able to do even past college. Did that help you at all as far as your own personal journey and your career?
Absolutely. I think what was kind of both difficult and heartbreaking was to see her competing when I was first injured and knowing that I couldn't do that anymore. And then we traveled and followed her career and went to track meets. And I was just getting used to being in a wheelchair. And so I had to work through a lot of emotional change and coming to terms with what had happened to me. But I think I really then kind of faced a decision that the one thing I could change was my attitude. I can't change what happened to me. And so I really began to focus on what the possibilities were. And I think her competing at a collegiate level really inspired me to want to do that.
What lessons, Rhonda, have you learned in your life that you still hold on to today as far as the really tough challenges you faced? And then what advice would you give to somebody that may be going through something similar to what you've been through?
What I would say is like you have to keep persisting and you have to keep, I don't know, finding courage within yourself. About a couple of years ago, I had a setback and was diagnosed with cancer again and went through extensive treatment and surgery, and I'm recovering from that. And it's been really trying, but I think the hard things in life really teach us how to be our best self. They really allow us to be authentic and true to ourselves. And I think they can bring the best out in us. And so, I don't know, it's just like you keep pushing forward despite the fear.
Today, you are a therapist. Obviously, to your background in social work, getting your master's degree. What are kind of some of the things that you've seen in your career as a therapist that a lot of people these days are dealing with when it comes to emotional and mental health?
Absolutely. I decided I kind of went into becoming a therapist later in life. I used my master's degree and worked in kind of nonprofit settings, but I decided to focus on trauma because I think that was the theme that kept coming up in my life. I had done a lot with Wounded Warrior and working with disabled veterans. And I just, for me, even in my own life experiences and having gone through a lot of medical trauma, I find that today, people are dealing with so many traumas in their life, whether it be from growing up in an adverse situation to even kind of what's happening with respects to just being laid off, right? Or the government closing. And so on a day-to-day basis, people it affects their anxiety, their depression, their sense of who they are, their sense of self, their sense of wanting to continue on with their life. And so being able to help them process and really help them tap into their own internal resources is really rewarding.
Is it tough though at times to not take your work home with you as a therapist? Because obviously I can only imagine that the things that you've heard, especially when it comes to trauma, can be very debilitating and you could hold on to at times.
Yeah, you definitely have to learn how to take care of yourself as a therapist and know when to take time off and not. When you're working with people with trauma, it's a really sacred place. And it's like you have to hold space for a lot of emotion and a lot of, you're not giving people advice. You're really just witnessing their story and holding space for whatever they're going through. And so, you have to do a lot of your own work. And I'm always working on myself. I see a therapist. I've been doing my own work as it relates to overcoming cancer. And I don't think there's an end point. Like we always can continue to improve and get better and continue to grow despite adversity.
Is there a piece of advice that you would give to your younger self with everything that you've gone through and everything that you've learned that you would share with that person if you were to talk to your younger self today?
It's a great question. I think I would say don't be so hard on yourself. You're so, I think all of us tend to be our harshest critics. But then again, I think that me being hard on myself is what really drove me to accomplish everything I've accomplished, right? And so I think with that, I'd say you're going to be okay. Your life is going to go on and you're going to actually survive many things you were told you wouldn't survive. And you're going to impact other people's lives. And all the work you're doing right now is going to pay off.
So, Rhonda, I was just curious, everything that we've been talking about, the accomplishments you've had, the obstacles you've overcome, with everything that you've been through in your life so far, what's the one thing that you are the most proud of that you would share with people in future generations as far as your legacy?
Wow. Those are big questions. I'm very proud of everything I've done in my life. But I think when it comes down to it, it's really about being kind. And it's about taking the life lessons and having humility. I think that's really important. It's not so much about the accolades and the awards and what we've done. I think those are great things, and I'm proud of those things. But I think I'm proud of the person I've become because I really try and remain humble, and I try and remain grounded in who I am, and I try and be authentic. And I think it's little things like letting people help you and reaching out and accepting help, such as therapy, right? And knowing that I can always, working on your mental health and your well-being is a lot like taking care of your health and working out, right? It's something that we have to work toward in terms of just caring for, not necessarily when we're in a crisis, right?
I feel like everybody's going through something. It takes a very
Absolutely.
humble person to openly admit that they need help, especially when it comes to guys. I feel like we get very much into our pride and ego and denial about reaching out for help. Do you feel like not enough people do that these days and they just try to take matters into their own hands and try to do things their way instead of reaching out for help?
I do. I think there's just a lot of stigma around mental health. I think fortunately that's changing, and I think there's more awareness and more acceptance. But I think people have this misconception that something has to be wrong with them, right? Or that they're somehow crazy if they're not coping or adapting. And I think just in you speaking about you being in the military, like it's not so much about that. It's about resilience, right? It's about learning how to be resilient in the face of adversity and tapping into internal resources. And, you asked about kind of taking trauma home with me. I always find that my clients inspire me. They teach me. I remain open to what they have to teach me every day because they show up and they do hard work, right? And to me, it's incredibly humbling when people are able to open themselves up and be vulnerable and do that.
So much. Well, Rhonda, I have really enjoyed our conversation today. I want to thank you again for your time. Guys, if you enjoyed this episode, Rhonda, please give it a huge thumbs up. If you didn't watch the last podcast episode or the last YouTube video, the links to both of those will be in the description below. And until next time, we will see you guys on the other side.